I have so many people that have worked for me that I would work for in a heartbeat because they're so talented and you just see how amazing they are. And when you can get that level of respect for one another, then when someone genuinely asks, tell me what I could have done better, tell me what I did well, tell me what you liked, and tell me what I could do better. And my hope would always be when I'm giving that kind of feedback, either to an employee or even someone above me, that they know it's because I care about them deeply, that it's coming from a good place, that it's the only good can come of this because we're in this together. So I had this experience in the branches and the districts, in all of these different areas of the bank, and there's women all around me, of course. The more I moved up, I remember this very clearly. The very first meeting that I was in, and it was a big executive meeting, and I'm sitting there at the table, I was the only female. And I remember that moment because I kind of looked around and thought,
welcome to another episode of the A1 Experience. I'm here with somebody I've known for a long time, but we are just connecting, and I am so grateful for her to bless us with her time. And so, Amy Hurd, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate you having me. I was so honored when you reached out.
Yeah. So I made it a goal to have as many lady bosses, women empowerment, like just women that are crushing it and doing big things and have and just lead with the heart. And so, you've been on my friends list for a while. And I was like, oh my goodness, she'd be the perfect person. So thank you. If you don't know who Amy Hurd is, Amy started her career as a part-time teller at a bank that would eventually be acquired by U.S. Bank. Yes, the bank that I worked for 7 years. That's how I know Amy. And Amy worked her way up the branch, district, and region and would eventually lead all of the in-store and on-site banking division and become the executive vice president of in-store and on-site. She's an incredible leader, a world traveler, and a passionate advocate for women. So thanks again, Amy, for joining me.
Thank you. It's always awkward when I get introduced like that, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
My pleasure. So if you could just share your journey in your career and, just kind of how you got to where you are today.
All right, great. Well, I'll try to keep it brief because I think it's incredibly boring, and I don't think I'm a very interesting topic, but I think most bankers would call themselves accidental. Were you an accidental banker?
Yes.
Did you? Yeah. So my husband is too. He works for U.S. Bank today, and he had no intention of ever going into banking. And so I think that's mostly what bankers would say. I, on the other hand, always wanted to go into banking. I was that nerd kid that wanted to go in banking, and I grew up in a really small town. There wasn't a lot of opportunities. So the bank branch, I would see people looked very professional, and they, carried themselves a certain way, and they always seemed so together that I thought, I want to go in banking. So my career story started in Kentucky, which is really where I'm from, or where I call home. And at 17 years old, right out of high school, my parents could not afford to send me to college. So my college experience needed to be either me paying for it or finding a company to pay for it or, putting together scholarships or whatever, which is fine. I have no regrets about that experience. But I always knew I had to start working to get this done. So I applied for a job as a part-time teller. It was a blind ad, meaning I didn't know what bank it was. It just said teller wanted. I'm like, well, surely, and no experience, which I'm like, well, I checked that box. So I started college that semester and got the call from this bank. And here, picture a 17-year-old kid walking into a bank. I had a suit on because I thought you should wear a suit. And they gave me the job on the spot. And I absolutely, I know we're going to talk about leadership, and you and I have talked about good leaders and bad leaders. I lucked into having the most phenomenal branch manager that I could have ever gone to work for. And that was totally by chance. I didn't, I was placed at a branch, didn't know anything about it. I was even new to Louisville, Kentucky, so I didn't even know my way around the city that well. And just lucked into a leader that cared and didn't treat me like a kid and didn't treat me for what I was, but looked at me as what I could be. And to this day, his name's Brian Stivers. To this day, I owe him the career that I had because he set me on the right path. All I knew is I wanted to be in banking because I thought people looked cool. He showed me what it was really about. And so thanks to him, I ended up in a leadership training program later on. That served me well. In my late 20s, I became a district manager over 24 branches, and I cringe a little bit at that leader because I was very young and green and managing a bunch of stuff and leading a bunch of stuff that I wasn't fully experienced in. And then, I'm very oriented. And so I wanted to be a senior vice president by 30. That was in my head. Well, I became a senior VP just shy of my 31st birthday. So I barely made that. That opened up to a leadership role out here in Las Vegas and opened up 11 states. And then finally, so 40 then, I wanted to be an executive vice president. Well, I missed that too. But I did become an EVP at 42. And that became kind of the final job that I had. 900 branches, 24 states, over 5,000 employees.
Whoa.
And, I'm sure we'll get to it, but I'll talk about why I left too, because that was everything I had ever dreamed of. Yeah. Nick, was just, what's that next step? What can I do next? What barrier can I break down? What glass ceiling? I never actually felt like I had a glass ceiling, and I will continue to say that U.S. Bank, it didn't care whether the leaders, male, female, what color, none of that mattered. It was people that deserved the opportunity. But I did like crushing those age barriers, especially. Yeah. That always made me fun. So anyway, in a nutshell, that's kind of my leadership story.
Sometimes those age goals are good and sometimes they're bad. When I was young, for the longest time, it's like, I want to have $1 million. And it's like, what's up with this $1 million number by 25? And I want to,
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's still good,
yeah,
no matter what, because you will get it, but it might take longer than you expect. It doesn't always happen on your timeline,
and
you will get it.
I think the best advice that I ever got, and I can't remember if this came from one of my bosses that I had or Richard Davis, the former CEO at U.S. Bank, who I've always admired, but the advice was, don't be so goal-oriented that you lose track of all the opportunities around you that aren't on your list. Right? And I think about that a lot because my career path was great. I have no regrets, but it was very linear. And I think about, I know you went from branches into business banking, and I do wish that I'd had my eyes more open to not what was the next promotion, but what's the next lateral move that I could make that would build out my experience and would build out just all of the experiences that I was lacking, so that when you do move up, you're going to be a much stronger leader because you have a better sense of a larger piece.
Yeah. What were the things that you did to create these goals? Did you write them down? Did you keep them hung up in your bathroom mirror? Like,
no,
what were some of the things that you did?
I didn't do that, and I don't know. I say I wrote them down. I don't even know. I just always had these ideas in my head, and every promotion that I had, I really did want to just be the best that I was in that moment. So I didn't get so hung up on my goals and I remember very clearly when I became a branch manager, that was a big deal. I was in my 20s. I was young. A lot of my peers were older. A lot of my peers were male. And I felt like not necessarily that I had something to prove to anybody else, but to myself. I want to be the leader that people point back to as saying, like what Brian Stivers was to me, right? Mm-hmm. That's what I want to be for others. So that was really more that it was about, is being the best that I could be in that moment. And then because of that, honestly, I got tapped on the shoulder more than I sought out opportunities. So then, my boss would say, or someone else in the company would say, gosh, you've done really good here. Then, let's move you on to something else.
Yeah. When you said you have this main mission in mind, and I'm not a big gamer, but I've played a type of game called an RPG. Okay. And there's always like the main quest.
Okay.
And then there's always like side quests, in between. Like you're playing.
Need to talk to my husband.
And so when you said just like paying attention, almost like it made me think of like the side quests, like helping people on the side quests on your way to the main quest. And so
that's a good way of thinking about it. I didn't have enough side quests. I was too intent on the main quest.
That's awesome. But you still impacted a lot of people along the way, which we'll get into.
Thank you.
So one of the questions is, as a woman in a traditionally male-dominated industry, what strategies have you used to navigate and succeed in your career?
That's a great question. Here's the thing. I, for the longest time, being female wasn't a problem, right? It wasn't pointed out to me to be something that was a negative. So I never felt like, for the longest time in my career, that in fact, I would even hear these, stories about the glass ceiling and how hard it is for women to move up. And I would think, gosh, I don't have that experience at all. And I continue to attribute US Bank for that because they didn't care. They were happy to move forward, whoever. Where I saw it though, Nick, is particularly when I went higher and higher, there became fewer and fewer women. So what I realized was I had this experience in the branches and the districts, in all of these different areas of the bank, and there's women all around me, of course. The more I moved up, I remember this very clearly. The very first meeting that I was in, and it was a big executive meeting, and I'm, sitting there at the table, I was the only female. And I remember that moment because I kind of looked around and thought, oh, this is why everybody's asking me this question. And the other thing about it was, my peers, and I'll talk about the last role that I had at the bank because it was a big job. Every one of my peers were male, and every one of my peers were about at least 10, if not 15 years older than me. So there was an inequity there. And it was not, these are the most wonderful men in the world. I still am friends with them today, so it has nothing to do with that. But one in particular would say, you remind me of my daughter. Well, that creates an inequity because you don't see me as a peer. You see me as someone as young and experienced. You might have a great affinity for me. You might like me and want me to do well. But that's where the difference started coming out. And you didn't ask me this question, but I'll lead into this story. What ended up happening was I'm a bit of a type A personality. I'm the most high-strung, anxiety-ridden person you'll ever meet. Like I am the opposite of chill and laid back. And that's just who I am. I embrace that. It's served me well. I don't, it's fine.
You seem very chill and laid
Do
back
I
to
seem
me,
chill?
though.
Yeah, I'm so not chill. But
I wasn't that close to you in proximity at the bank, so maybe I don't know.
So if I ever feel like I need to do more, I just do more. I over-prepare. If I needed to be at a meeting, and here's the thing too. So with 24 states, if I was ever in my Vegas office, I actually officed out of Las Vegas, which was phenomenal. But the bank operates on Central Time. So an 8 a.m. meeting is actually a 6 a.m. meeting in Las Vegas. And that was back when you have to be in your office if you're in a meeting, and you have to be on video, and you have to have a suit on, right?
Yep.
Well, in order to do that, I'd get up 3:30, 4 a.m. I'm female. It takes me a little bit long. My husband get out the door in 10 minutes. It takes me a little longer. But then, get in the office, prepare for the meeting that's happening at 6 a.m., be ready to go. Like, I just didn't ever want to come across, because what I did lack in experience, I would never dispute the fact that my peers had another 15 years of experience on me. But I never would want anybody to say, well, Amy Hurd didn't work hard enough, or Amy Hurd wasn't prepared. So that's a tool that I use that again, I don't regret. I think that's good advice. I mean, who isn't served well by preparing and working hard, whether it's your health or your personal life or whatever? You've got to work at it. Things don't just come easily. But that came at a cost. So for 4.5 years, I had this job, and I mean, 2-3 cities a week, getting up at 4 a.m., dinners at night, all of these things. And what ended up happening was I didn't see it in the moment. And now there's words for it. There's terms for it like burnout and all of these kind of things. But I didn't have the tool, and this is the advice that I would give to me today, is that no one's going to take care of you but you. And no matter what your goals are, personal, professional, whatever, you owe it to yourself to make sure that your mental and physical health are optimal, because none of that matters if you reach those goals and you're not where you should be. So, and I tell this story, I would have never told this story when I was in the job, but I tell this story now because that's kind of been part of my superpower now for women, is to be authentic and honest about what's going on. My hair started falling out. I was having panic attacks. And panic attacks, for anyone that's familiar with panic attacks, they never happen at the time you would think. So I could get on stage and talk to 1,200 people and get off and feel great, like it went really, really well. Then at night, I could be having dinner with my husband and I'd have a panic attack. So my body clearly was trying to say, like, something's not right here. Like, yes, so outwardly, I've been told this, I hope this is true, that it seemed like I had it together, but I didn't have it together.
Yeah.
And so when the opportunity came that the bank went through this huge reorg, the only thing in my head that I kept thinking was, this is my chance to leave. And this is my chance to get out and to do something different. And then fortunately, because life is fantastic this way, it actually led me into opportunities to focus on things that I think I'm good at and in a great place to be, which is help women to never go through what I went through. So that I can find, women, not just at US Bank, but women that are, climbing that ladder and don't get to the top or near the top as ill-equipped as I was of how to handle the fact that, yeah, you might be the only woman in the room. You might feel like, even though these are really great people, you still might feel some sort of a competition of having to prove yourself. Yeah. How do you do that the right way without sacrificing your health? And so it took a lot of, really I took a year off, and it took a lot of self-reflection about that. Some of the things, this will blow your mind, but it's true. So I had a stalker at one point who was a customer. And so I had to get this restraining order, and he was
in Kentucky,
just insane. He was actually lives in Chicago, and it's a crazy story.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, I just thought about all of the things that I dealt with, like the times that I was given a note on an airplane by some creepy guy that just wrote me a crude note, or the guy that tried to get in my hotel room, door one time, like all of these things that happen. And super weird. And here's the thing, I'm not special. This happens to women every day. But it was my aha that my male peers that were all 55 to 60 years old, they weren't getting creepy notes. They didn't have to worry about their physical health in a hotel room. They didn't have to worry about these things.
I say that all the time. Like, men, we can go for a run late at night and not think anything of it.
That's right.
But my wife wouldn't be able to do that same run.
Right.
I wouldn't want her to do a run at nighttime. And that's crazy to just think.
It's very eye-opening to think about.
Yeah.
Because so I would be, I might be in a city that I didn't know very well, and I'd walk back to the hotel after dinner, and it would be dark. Those kind of things. Well, I need to think about who can I ask to walk with me. So I say this, and trust me, I'm not saying this for any other reason than I want to be open and authentic about it, because those are the things nobody talked to me about when I was climbing up the ladder. Like, you just think, oh, you get there and it's this, beautiful role. And the role itself it was the best job in the world. But when you have to deal with all of this other stuff, it comes at a cost. And it comes at a cost either, there's a lot of studies on it called mind share, how women have so many things that they have to think about that they don't have the same amount of mind share potentially that a man could have about focusing on work, because they've got to worry about so many other things. And it's fascinating. So and you can tell I get excited about it, but I get excited about it because we can do something about this. This is, these are fixable problems. And, the number one thing is companies being aware of it and having the resources in place to help women that are climbing up the ladder and achieving these roles to have the support that they need.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I'm learning a lot about right now with my wife, she's due in 2 months, is
congratulations,
how much she has to prepare and mentally, and you talk about mind share, she's thinking about all this stuff about delivering a baby. And I don't have to, I'm trying to be there for her, but I don't have to think about how it's going to be delivered and her, I don't know why I thought about that. But that's an element that we don't have to think about.
But the fact that you acknowledge that and you see that is huge, and talk to her about that, right? How are you feeling? I don't have children. I would be scared to death. I don't know. I can only imagine I would be scared to death. Yeah. And of course you too. This isn't about women only being the ones that have burdens to carry. I want to be clear about that too.
Yes.
This isn't that, women have it so much harder. It's just different. Mm-hmm. And I think bringing those kind of things out and talking about it is always positive.
Yeah. We should always communicate about it.
Yeah.
One of the things you said, I just wanted to share before I get into the next question was, I want to be transparent. So there was a time when I was in my banking career and I was at my first manager meeting. I remember it's, back in the day, you have to show up in person, suited and booted and ready to go. Actually, first, before I get into that, I want to acknowledge you for just your preparedness, because the last podcast we just shot, the guy's writing a book on over preparing and stuff like that. So when you said that, I was just like, I linked it to, and I'm like, that's amazing. So, okay. But it's back when you have to show up for these meetings. It's my first manager meeting. And this was one of the things that I realized quickly. I was like, I don't want to be a manager, which is funny because now I manage a group of 20 staff members, my insurance agency. But I remember I'm at this particular meeting, and I remember looking around the table. Everyone looked stressed out. They looked, bags under their eyes. And quite frankly, at this particular moment, everybody looked unhealthy. Like,
wow,
just
that makes me sad.
At this particular moment, but it was, and I remember thinking to myself, like, I don't want to be a manager. Yeah. That's what it looks like. It's like this. And that's why I went the SBS route. However, there was some leadership that changed and everything got better. But yeah, I just remember when you said that, there was a moment where you were like, stressed, and you're like, what's wrong with me? This, and that. And
that does make me sad. And I tell you, certainly I hope we'll talk about the positive things too. I mean, being a leader, I just like being in charge, which is probably part of it. But being a leader and knowing that I can have influence on people's livelihoods, on their ability to grow and develop as a person, on their experiences. Like I don't say any of that in a self-promoting way. I just say it's so humbling to think the impact that a leader has on their employees. And I love, how can you not love that? It's the managing part that trips you up. It's the managing part that sucks. Yeah. The leading part itself is helping people understand their strengths and figure out how they can, align their strength and their purpose with the role and the job that makes them great. It's caring about people deeply. All of the things, and I told you before we sat down, I just have fallen in love with the Las Vegas community. It's just this community of people that are very optimistic. There's so many people coming from all over the world, and they come here because they see a better path in front of them. And so, to be in a position where you can make that happen for them, where hard work and all of that comes together, there's nothing like it. Now, I've made a ton of mistakes as a leader, there's no doubt. But what it really comes down to is treating people well and valuing them, and help them get where they want to be, and then get out of their way, really, is a lot of it.
I always like to tell my team that I want them to do well, even if it means, I want to help prepare them for what's next. And what's next doesn't always have to be with me. It's just, let's help prepare you, get you to your next level, wherever that is. And I've learned from some really good, really amazing leaders that I implement into my agency today. Shout out Vanessa, shout out Tito,
Indeed.
And
I know Tito and Vanessa. They both deserve a huge shout out.
Yeah. And then I've also just kind of observed things where it's like, I'm going to do that differently when I'm in that seat. I'm going to do that differently. And I think that's kind of what we all do. Good. What would you do differently in your career? Is there anything you would do differently?
I really don't have regrets. Again, I wish I'd kind of built out some experiences so that it wasn't such a linear path. And I think the big thing from a leadership perspective, I told you I would cringe at the 20-something-year-old that was leading a group of people. I probably had, about 100 employees on my team at that point. And my lack of experience in life was my biggest detriment. So I would read every leadership book I could come across. That was, I'm much older than you. That was before there were podcasts. I love podcasts now. I don't read a lot. I listen. But, I would read whatever books, and I would get inspired by that. And so I had kind of the technical aspect, but I didn't have the practical experience. As a 20-something-year-old, I was not married. I did not have children. And so I would often wonder, well, why aren't people more like me? Or, like, why don't people want what I want, or whatever those things are. And I think some of that, it doesn't necessarily, yes, it's growth as a leader. A lot of it's just life experience. Like you realize as you get older, wow, you didn't know anything.
Yeah.
You were very smart. You were very talented. My 20-something-year-old self had a lot to offer. But she didn't know a lot. And I wish that I had had the empathy. And I love that actually through the pandemic, I think this whole topic of empathy has come about. How do we be more empathetic? And then I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and the city has just been through, after the killing of Breonna Taylor, just this huge opportunity to heal. And these are heavy topics. And I just think how naive I often was about what people were going through. And until you walk in someone's shoes, you have no idea. So I wouldn't say it's regret, but I think if I did anything different, I wish it was figuring out how to have some sort of an awareness, and not just awareness, but respect that you don't need to want what I want. You don't necessarily have it easier than I do. You might, have it harder. You might have, I don't know. But how do you, I wish I had been more in tune with that, because now I can be. Now I can, very easily have a lot of empathy for people that want something different, or maybe what I would have called lazy or not working hard enough is actually, you have no idea what's going on at home and what they're dealing with and what they're carrying, and just having some grace for that.
Yeah. I don't even know how you get that experience, because it's easy now because you get to zoom out, you're not in the weeds or in the thick of things, but I don't even know how you would.
I don't know, except that I should have listened to more older people.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it was. Yeah, or something, or even hopefully I'm not the only one that thinks this. I'm probably a horrible person. But, I remember being younger and getting advice, and you're like, yeah, you don't really, in my head, yeah, you don't really know. It's different now or whatever. And now I look back on it's not different. It is not different. And the crazy thing about that is, I know you and I talk a lot about traveling because we both share a love of travel. And the more I travel, the more I realize, okay, everybody have some core similarities. What we want for our families, what we want, we want to live in peace. We want to, all of these things. But history just keeps repeating itself. We're not learning anything. And now I'm really getting deep, so I'm sorry about that. But, from a leadership perspective, and, when you're a kid, it's like, I wish those mistakes are no different than what probably my grandparents made at the same age. And you just don't. So I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. I don't know how to is there a pill you can take or something?
Yeah. I think you nailed it. It's talking with more people that have life experiences. Yeah. That have been through it.
And really listening.
Yes. And because that will most likely be our train of thought. It's just hopefully we can adopt it quicker. I want to go back to leadership. You led 5,000 people. I didn't know you led 5,000 people. That's insane.
It was insane.
There are how many layers of middle management and entry management?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Wow. Yeah, 5,000 people.
So here's the thing, in my moments of panic attack, I might be thinking about the 5,000 people that I genuinely felt responsible for. But truly, from a management standpoint, I had 13 direct reports. My 13 direct reports, all senior level leaders, the finest leaders. In fact, if I went out and started a bank today, those are the 13 people I would hire.
Those would be your Avengers?
They would.
That you could
every single one of them. Yep. And some of them are at some really good banks right now. Some of them are still at US Bank, but that would be my team. They were the dream team. That's who I focused on, right? Because I didn't need to manage 5,000 people. I needed to make sure that the 13 people that were doing that had everything that they needed. And what that looked like for me, which I, without fail, believe that this is the best kind of leadership approach anyone can have, which is knock down obstacles for your people. Don't be an obstacle for your people. And no one, I think, means to be an obstacle, but there's so many leaders out there that for so many reasons, I'm not even sure, either overmanage, over-meeting, do too many check-ins, too micromanaging, or it's the other side, they're absent and you never see them. And I really think that, good leadership is striking that balance between don't let me be in your way, but let me make sure that I'm giving you everything that you need to be successful. And I'm not pretending that I was that every day by any means, but I did try to strive to be that. And then make sure that I had enough people around me that helped me see my own blind spots, that would speak truth to power to me if I was screwing up, if I wasn't being the leader that I needed to be. And that's easier said than done. And it's hard to get negative.
Who do you get that feedback from? You got to trust them and realize that they're not just, hating or anything like that.
Yeah. My biggest example, and I won't give his name, but I had a branch manager when I was a district manager. And this guy tested me, right? Like he was kind of the exact opposite of me in many ways. We led similarly, but we were just very different. And what was very interesting is that, after a manager's meeting, he would come into my office sometimes and he'd kind of let me have it. Like, when you said this, this is what, he would coach me on it. And my very first reaction was, well, who are you? You're being insubordinate or, whatever. And for whatever reason, one, I really admired him. He was a good branch manager. So it wasn't like, this wasn't a low performer telling me how to do my job better. This is somebody I knew was going to go further. And I started to listen. But not only that, I realized that, man, he did it all the right way because he didn't hold back. He didn't sugarcoat or filter what he was feeling, which, oh, by the way, was probably what some other people were feeling. But he also did it the right way behind closed doors. He never challenged me in front of his peers. He was never going to do anything to disrespect me in front of my peers. And it was a good learning for me to have early in my leadership career because then I looked to seek out those people in my life because I was just lucky enough to have him. I mean, that's a hard thing to do.
How do you extract that? Because you said, did he willingly give you that information?
He did. Okay. He was that personality, but I don't think that's the norm.
Yeah. How do you extract that?
You have to find those people. And so this reminds me too, I don't know if you've heard the term psychological safety. So we talk a lot about psychological safety in the terms of a company cannot truly be successful until the people that are within that organization feel that they've got the psychological safety to say what they're really thinking. And so many organizations, you just don't have that. I mean, at the extreme end of it, you keep your head down, your mouth shut, you do what you're told, and you don't say anything. But even in a healthy organization that prides themselves in having a lot of two-way communication, I will tell you that in my exit interview, when I left, I had like 3 exit interviews. And it was so funny. And partly it was because people were shocked I was leaving and wanted to know why I was leaving. And I remember this HR, lovely lady, but I had nothing to lose. I was leaving. So I started to share some of the stories like I told you about, it's not in itself the reason I left, being the only woman at the table or having these things happen, but they pile up and pile up and pile up until you just don't want to do it anymore. And that was the point that I got to. And she said to me like 3 times in this conversation, well, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you say something? And I really had to reflect on that because I did work for an incredible man, one of the best leaders that I've ever worked for in my life, who would have done anything for me. I never shared with him that I was stressed out, having panic attacks, that I was coming in at 4 a.m. or coming in at 5 a.m. to prepare for meetings. Like he was probably doing the same thing, honestly. And so I thought about that and I thought, true psychological safety is even hard under the best circumstances because we don't want to let people down. And so, one, I thought we got to stop putting this chip on women's shoulder that, well, you should have said something. We need to create an environment where people and women feel invited to say something. So when you ask, how do you expel that? It's not an easy thing to do, but I will tell you, I have so many people that have worked for me that I would work for in a heartbeat because they're so talented and you just see how amazing they are. And when you can get that level of respect for one another, then when someone genuinely asks, I need to understand my blind spots. I need to see how I can improve. and get very specific with it. So don't leave it just so broad. I think that's difficult. I think what you can do is, okay, we're heading into this meeting. This meeting's really important to me. I want you to do something for me. I want you to look at this through the lens of, I'm your employee and you have this chance to coach me. And then after the meeting, one-on-one behind closed doors, tell me what I could have done better. Tell me what I did well. Tell me what you liked, and tell me what I could do better. And I think making it that specific, one, is helpful. But then two, don't make it a one and done. Do this often. And then over and over time, you're creating a culture where it's okay to give people feedback. And I call it constructive criticism. I don't think it's negative at all. It's constructive criticism. And all of us can get better in everything that we're doing. And the more that you do it, the less it makes it uncomfortable and the more it makes it the norm. And my hope would always be when I'm giving that kind of feedback, either to an employee or even someone above me, that they know it's because I care about them deeply, that it's coming from a good place, that it's, that this only good can come of this because we're in this together.
Yeah. And you're either going to hear it directly for them, or that person's spouse is going to hear it, or your other employees are going to hear it. So it's like, you might as well get it directly from the source.
That's right. I love that. That's very true. Yeah, my husband's listened to a lot over the years.
Yeah. No, seriously. I mean, that's going to be one of the first couple things that comes up. So, yeah. Well, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. You're one of my favorite people that I've talked to about leadership, and what you've done in banking echoed all the way down to my manager and Vanessa, who I give her a lot of credit with how I run my agency, with how I coach my team members, and that is crazy, but it kind of came from you, and so your leadership echoed, so you should be proud of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You kind of touched on it, and this is a question that maybe you can elaborate a little bit further. Maybe you don't have to, but you retired at the pinnacle of your career, and why? What led you to that decision? You kind of touched on it.
I did.
Because what was next for you?
Oh, it was such a hard time. So, picture, I'll tell you the story. I like stories because stories give you a visual. So we're sitting in this meeting, me and my older white guy peers. Wonderful, wonderful people, but older white guy peers. And my boss had announced his retirement, new boss coming in, also great men, men I admire. And they are talking about, we want to do a complete reorganization of the consumer bank at U.S. Bank. Now, we had never gone through anything like this. We've certainly had reorganizations through the years, but this was a full-on, everybody loses their job and has to reapply for a position. And for anyone that's ever been through that, it is horrific.
Yeah.
It is awful. It is, and I can put on my corporate hat and tell you all the reasons why it's the right thing to do, but it is a horrible thing to do.
It's not easy.
It is not easy at all. And that was the first time that U.S. Bank had ever done this. So we're sitting in this room, and I won't give names, but they're laying out what this is going to look like. And what's fascinating is they said, but you, so my four peers and I, the five of you actually don't have to do that. You don't have to reapply for your job. You don't have to go through that. You are going to pick the role at the top of this organization that you're going to fulfill, and then help us build the rest of the organization. And I, again, don't say that to be self-promoting, but that is a heck of a place to be, to know that I wouldn't have to go through the stress, that I could just, pick kind of the job that I wanted. I don't know what it would have been. I don't know if maybe I would have moved into business banking. Maybe I would have taken that as an opportunity to do something different. But the only thing screaming in my head at that time was, this is your chance to leave. This is your chance to get out. Well, if that's not a red flag telling you that's, there was an excitement about it. It was this, and even a dread a little bit of, I don't know that I could go through this if I wanted to go through it. So that truly is why I left. I have no regrets about it. I feel like, I was 46 at the time. Friends of mine like Vanessa would say it was a little bit of a mic drop moment of being able to leave. So that's kind of cool, right? Like I didn't leave. Yeah, I didn't leave, on the other side of things. I kind of left at the top. But I was able to take that year off and, really reflect. And where I'm so glad that it took me, though, was having conversations with US Bank by great men that did care, that said, we really want to understand why you did leave. We do want to understand that. And I don't know what the path was for me. I mean, I don't, and I don't know that it's useful for me to think about what that path would have been, because it doesn't matter. It wasn't the path for me. But to be able then to come back into the organization, which is what I've done for the last 3 years, and work as a consultant to help them keep other women from feeling the way I did, and putting together, one of the things I'm most proud of, and I certainly didn't do the heavy lifting on this, but the work that we did allowed us to create support circles for our employees. And these support circles, I had the chance to interview and survey thousands of women at the bank and get a really good sense, because I wanted to be careful. My story is not every woman's story. And, just like, nobody should have to represent a large, nobody knows anyone's individual story. So I did lots of interviews. And Nick, I met women that were going through breast cancer that hadn't told their boss.
Wow.
That was going through treatments in silence because they were worried about, and not worried about the bank, but worried they just didn't know how to deal with that, right? Or, women that were going through a divorce, women that were, fighting for custody of their children, women, like in my scenario, aging parents. So that was the other thing. And I really should have started with that, because a lot of this too was, my parents aren't getting any younger. They're in Kentucky. I was going back and forth. My husband's an only child. His parents, my father-in-law died at 92 a year and a half ago. My mother-in-law is about to turn 90. Life's too short for us not to focus on what's really important. And so that was a big reason why I left too, is that I need to get my priorities straight. I want to be the daughter I need to be. I want to be the wife that I need to be. But I started interviewing all these women and realized that a lot of similarities to that. And so why would women want a C-suite job, right, with 5,000 employees when they're just trying to get their kids off to school and make sure that their aging mother is doing well? I mean, it's really, really difficult. So we put together these support circles where, and it's not just for women, but where all employees can talk about this and know that corporate America does have a heart. Corporate America does care. And everybody's going through something, and it is okay to think about it. Or to talk about it. I started my career over 30 years ago. And at that time, that was a corporate America where you do not bring your personal life to work. You remember that? Yeah. You're much younger than me, but people would say you leave your personal life at the door when you walk in the bank branch. That is ridiculous. Yeah. Who can do that? The things that people are carrying.
Everything's connected.
It is so connected. And if we're not acknowledging that, then we're missing the boat, because there's no way that, you and I can be our best versions of ourselves if we're trying to push aside parts of us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, one of the first things that I like to ask about during a coaching session if someone's not putting up their regular numbers is this aside.
Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah.
Everything good at home?
Totally.
Get enough sleep,
That's right.
something going on. And
I'm glad you say that.
I don't want to pry on that,
yes.
But that's usually something people are going through stuff. We're all going through stuff.
But I'm so glad you say that, because so often I think, particularly inexperienced sales leaders and sales managers, it's all about the numbers, right? It's all about that. And I get it. I managed a sales organization. Numbers are very important, right? Yeah. They, the numbers is what keeps us afloat. But numbers are the output. Numbers are the last part of the equation. The first part of the equation is, how is your mental health? How is your physical health? How do you feel? Do you feel confident enough to do your job? Are you trained? Are you skilled enough to do your job? all of these things, and they're all connected. It's not just one thing. You can't have, you could have great physical health and not be right with your mental health. It could be the opposite of that. You could be all of those things. So when all of those things align, then the numbers shoot through the roof. You really don't even have to manage the numbers so much, because that just becomes the output of a really productive person that knows how to do their job, likes their job, likes what they're doing, and I know that's so obvious. This is not rocket science, but I see the mistake happen over and over and over again in organizations. You probably have seen that too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's like you said, it's how isn't this one of the first things we're talking about? And I juggle with that balance all the time too, right? Like I can use an example. I like the idea of offering a mental health day to my team. There's something not right. Like I'm there, like it happens to me. There's days where I just don't come to the office, right? I don't have to answer to nobody, but I'm more empathetic when a team member does it. Now, it's happening often, of course, you know what I'm saying? Like on the other side of the fence, it's like, all right, that's kind of happening a lot, and so you got to have some boundaries, of course, but Radical Candor, I don't know if you read that book.
Yeah.
It's just, you can't challenge, what is it? You can't challenge people if you don't care. And you got to care. Like you can't do one without the other. So one last question. No, two last questions. Where do you see many leaders struggle?
I think leaders struggle being authentic. And I've certainly struggled with that, especially when I was younger, trying to absorb all the leadership material I could and listening to whatever. Sometimes it pushes you to be something you're not. And that's never going to work. And I don't know if you've ever gone through Strength Finders. U.S. Bank started using Strength Finders quite some time ago, and I'm really glad that they did, because it's the premise of stop telling people what they're doing wrong and trying to make them something they're not, and focus on their strengths. So, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, or you like numbers or you like people, there's not a right or wrong. They're all the right answer. But, make sure that who you are aligns with the job that you have, that you're not trying to be something that you're not. I will tell you that I've worked with a number of leaders over the years that they didn't like leading, and they found themselves in a leadership role, and it just didn't come natural to them. That wasn't something that they were natural at. And they actually needed somebody to kind of let them off the hook, to say, you don't have to do this. Maybe being an individual contributor is a much better role for you. There's no shame in that. That is a wonderful thing. So I don't know. I'm using the word authentic because I think it's, who are you really? And that comes with time. And then also, if you're not authentic, people can see right through that. I mean, if you ever had a manager that they ask you a question. I just had something the other day. Somebody asked me a question. I don't even know who they were. And I remember in my head, I'm like, that's not your question. There's a question behind your question. And that's a big pet peeve of mine. It's like, ask me what you really want to know. Don't be all cryptic and weird and, just be authentic and transparent. Now, that doesn't mean, that you can operate with bad behavior, right? Like, in fact, I often say, don't let authenticity make it okay, for bad behavior. But you need to be who you are. And if you're not embracing that, then everybody sees it.
I lied. I have a couple more questions. So
I'll need more coffee.
You probably, had a lot of vacation time, right? Like worked up. You could take probably a month, maybe 2 months.
Wow, if only I had done that. But
you were able to, right? It just didn't always work out that way. But you've always been somebody that has traveled the world, and I admire that about you. I think that's where we have common ground. Yeah. When I found you on Instagram, I was like, "Oh, I get to see her travels," And one of the things I want to ask is, you are now in this more in this consultant role, and you're able to travel. Yeah. Was it the same? You get to travel with a little bit more freedom. Is it traveling different?
I like that question. That's a good question. I'm very fortunate to have been able to travel. My husband and I both have been to about 40 countries. I hear that number though, and I think, oh my gosh, that should be 140. There's so much to see, right? And the more you're probably like that too. The more you travel, the more you want to travel, and you're planning your next trip on the
same
same
wait until
trip.
later. So like I travel now, it's like my back hurts. It's like,
Yeah,
and I'm
my trips are changing. They're a little less physical, less hiking than That's a really good question. So my husband is working full time. So his inability to travel limits our ability to travel.
Okay.
I can travel, but I don't want to see these places without Brian. He's my best friend, and I want to share it with him. But it does. I mean, I do think about that now that I have so much flexibility, not being in corporate America and be able to take assignments and do things from anywhere. My dream really would be to go and spend. Typically our longest vacation has ever been 2 weeks.
okay.
And even then, I don't know what your longest has been. It gave me anxiety being away 2 weeks.
I was in Italy after day 10. I'm like, another week? I'm ready to get back to it, like
that, and then I just
week?
got worried, like, what am I missing? And am I going to get too out of touch with things? And by the way, you have good people, so none of that happens. Anything you're worried about, they probably did better with you gone. But my dream would be to stay somewhere a month. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why the month is in my head.
Probably have to integrate work into that, right?
But integrate work, but then also just integrate the culture in a bigger way. Because what I feel like I miss, and I know this to be true. I've got friends that have traveled everywhere. Yeah, but did you just fly in for a day and see the touristy things and then leave? Or did you really immerse yourself into the culture and learn about the history and what people have gone through and what they've learned and how they're different or similar and all of those things? And that's where travel excites me, is where can I learn something?
It takes it takes me 5 days to like adjust to like, okay, I'm here. And I don't know why, but it just takes me some time to be like, I'm really here,
You're too young to be saying that. I'm starting to feel that. I'm starting to feel it's a little bit harder to travel than it used to be. But I just get so excited about trying all the new food and meeting people. And
so I like to just rank things. So top 3 places you've ever been.
Oh, geez, that's tough. Okay, I'm gonna say
you have 3 places you can go. Like that's it. You're being capped out. Like
that I have
after
been.
This, your traveling is done. There's three
that I've
places.
never been to, or
maybe both. Like you have only 3 more destinations you can go to, and for whatever reason you're cut off right there. Where are you going? Places you've been or places you haven't been yet?
So limiting.
It's a weird question.
I've not been to Africa.
Okay.
So I need to mark Africa off. I'm not really even sure where in Africa, because I could name 15 places in Africa I'd like to go to, but so I'm going to make it very broad. I want to see more of Asia. I've only been to Japan in Asia, so I've got all those.
It's a good place to be.
I know you went to Japan,
That's my
wasn't
favorite place
it?
I've ever been.
Me too. The food and
incredible.
The culture and Tokyo. Oh, it just fueled me.
The combo of like busyness and like hectic. That this is like crazy.
Yes.
You feel like you're in a video game. It's like, I don't know how to explain it, but then it's like also very calm and peaceful in nature.
Yes.
Orderly and
Very zen-like.
structured.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and they do the forest bathing where they just immerse themselves in the forest. Have you heard about that? Like, there's just an incredible culture. So I needed to see more of Asia. Like, I want to see Vietnam, and I want to see, there's so many places in Asia. Number 3, I'm doing really broad because somebody's going to see this.
So you wouldn't
and play
go
it
back to a
me.
place you've already been then?
No, I wouldn't.
I love it. Okay.
I wouldn't. I'd keep going to new places. I don't know. I feel like the third one needs to be like a wild card. So my husband and I play this game. We some reason aren't doing it right now, but we play this game where we alternate who picks the country. But we play this game. So you choose 3 countries. You give the 3 picks to the other person. They narrow it down to the place to go. And so I kind of feel like my third place needs to be like a wild card for my husband to pick.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I kind of like this not knowing, and the excitement of it.
Then let's go back. Top 3 places you have been to. Then.
That really is hard because they're all phenomenal. I would say Peru and Machu Picchu. I know you've been there. Mm-hmm. It was just awe-inspiring, the whole trip, and I would love to see more of that. We recently did Antarctica.
Okay.
And that was pretty mind-blowing. And the third one, I would actually say Slovenia.
Oh.
We've done a lot. Well, that's Central Europe, but it feels a little Eastern Europe. And my husband and I love Eastern Europe, but I didn't know anything about Ljubljana or Slovenia. All I remember is like a screensaver of Lake Bled, which if you saw it, you would recognize it. Other than that, I knew nothing about it, and it was amazing. It kind of reminded me of, find a state that has mountains and, and all this different, and the lakes and all the outdoor stuff, but then this great city with great food and, great brew pubs and all these great things. And so I feel like, and I would go back there. I've
never heard of that,
and stay a month. Okay, well, add it to your list. I'll give you some notes. But
one I always hear is from like the people that work on the airplanes. I can't think of their name right now, but they travel a lot.
Yeah.
And Morocco has come up a lot on some of those lists.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I think that's place is a must.
yeah, I would agree with that.
Last I wanted to say is how cool is it when you see a screensaver of a place you've been to? It's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like oddly
I
satisfying.
think my favorite thing is when we got back from Slovenia and I was telling something about it, and a friend of mine was like, "Oh my gosh, I have a rowing machine, and that's my favorite lake to do my rowing machine is Lake
Wow.
Bled. I can't believe you were actually there."
That's awesome. That's crazy. All right, so Amy, before I get to the last question, I just want to acknowledge you for the leader that you are. You've indirectly impacted me, I guess directly or indirectly, and many other people. What you're doing for what you've done for the banker community, what you're doing for women, what you're your influence, it shows, and because we're connected to a lot of people, and you're still connected to them till this day. And so thank you for that, and just for sharing this space with me and picking your brain and learning all these amazing things. So I want to acknowledge you. And then my last question is, the definition of A1 is of the highest standards of the highest quality, and I want to know what are 3 standards that you live your life by.
It's broad, but ethics, truly leading a life that is ethical and honest, authenticity, striving to be the most authentic person I can be, and giving back. I am in an incredible position to give back, and I have consumed too much in my years on earth. So how can I start giving back, whether to others or to the earth or whatever that looks like? But I volunteer with the Red Cross on Mondays, and every Monday I think, gosh, I should be doing so much more because there's so many people in need and there's so much help that can be given. And I wish I'd started that sooner. Some, true, real work, right? And not any kind of volunteerism is good, but real work, rolling up your sleeves and really helping. Maybe that's part of my age, but a lot more important to me now than ever. So those are my 3.
Wow, that's amazing. I like what you said. I said I consume too much. There are moments where I feel almost like guilty for how blessed I am in a weird way. And it's just like, how do I give it back? Like, I don't deserve all this. It's like, how can I help people? And so that's awesome. Well, Amy, how can my audience and those that have gotten value from this connect with you if they wanted to connect with you?
Yep, I think the best way would be through LinkedIn. So Amy Hurd on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect with as many people as possible. I am very passionate about the work that I've done, and always happy to connect with like-minded people or anybody that can inspire me that I can help inspire. I would love to connect with. And finally, I'll just say kudos to you. I mean, everything that you've built, you should just be so incredibly proud. And I walked in the office and I was just so excited to see it. And I know, with the baby on the way, I wish you all of the success to come. And I can't wait to sit back and kind of follow to see what Nick Sock is going to be doing 10 years from now.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you got some value, go ahead and subscribe, like, and go ahead and follow Amy. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Nick.